Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere.
You are destroying the Constitution of the United States. May God have mercy on your souls.
Good day.
Yes.
Sir, say. Good day.
We could be saved if we just elected the right white man to power.
That's creepy, but that's in a different category of creepy.
Zit-zoo, zit-zoo, zit-zoo.
Gary Gygax. Of course he introduced zoning laws.
Okay.
You know what? Don't.
Yeah.
The less I have to do with that game, the better.
Here's my favorite part of the defense. Claudius was probably fucking his sister.
Jughead, not Jarhead. I have nothing against Marines. I want to make that very clear. I'd be really interested to find out what fucking truth that woman was trying to get at.
Like with most episodes, I can bring it back to wrestling. Oh. Right, well, he's got other people who work for him who also do things, and they can transmutate human size into smaller worlds, after all.
Fuck you.
I still don't give a shit about getting fake property in a fantasy game. This is a Geek History of Time,
where we connect nerdery to the real world. My name is Ed Blaylock. I'm a 45-year-old middle school history teacher with one section of 7th grade English, currently distance teaching here in Northern California. And I am also a very happily married father of a 2-year-old who just recently interrupted one of my distance learning lessons by coming up to me and telling me about a dragon, to which I responded, well, go get your sword. You know how we deal with dragons in this household.
How very British.
That's me. Who are you?
I'm Damian Harmony. I am a single dad. Thanks for that salt. No, I'm a single dad of 2. Count them 2 children. One who's 10 and one who's almost 8, which is amazing. Neither of whom have interrupted my distance teaching. I'm also a high school Latin teacher with a section of world history. My daughter recently asked our player to play Under Pressure by David Bowie. Afterwards, I had her listen to... now, fun fact, did you know that David Bowie signed away all the rights to that song because he didn't like the record label he was working with?
Really?
Yeah, so he gave it all to Queen.
I had not known that.
Yeah. Story goes, he gave all those rights to Queen because he was like, look, it'll get me exposure, that's fine, and I'll finish writing bad albums for this record label, then I can go be the artist that I want to be. So he did that. Fun.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I had her listen to Ice Ice Baby right afterwards. And I explained to her that the guy who sang that song claimed that he came up with that beat all on his own. And she's 7, and she's like, no, he didn't. It's obvious. So I'm like, there you go. There you go.
It is pretty obvious, certainly in retrospect. Yeah. And I have to say, I love you in the agape way a little bit more for hearing that, because just earlier today on my Facebook feed, a memory came up.
Oh.
From 2 years ago when my son was about 3 months old. Mm-hmm. We went down to visit my parents in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And my mother and I went to the store to try to find a swimsuit for my son, who at that point was still an infant.
Sure.
And we couldn't find one. And so my wife immediately got on, after we got home, my wife immediately got on Amazon and started looking. And she said, you know me, if there's a problem, I'll solve it. And I made sure to make eye contact with her before I said, check out the hook while your DJ revolves it.
Oh my.
She gave me a blank stare, to which I responded, ice, ice, baby.
Oh, wow.
So I was working on my dad game from like right there.
From the moment he was ex utero.
Yeah, pretty much from the moment he was ex utero. And nice. and I also want to point out for our audience that when I posted that on Facebook, you you specifically were one of the first people to reply with a comment that was another line from the song that led to a whole series of our back and forth.
Sure.
Part of which involved me saying, no, but she did look like she wanted to throw a harpoon at me. So,
Well done, sir. Well done.
So, yeah.
Oh.
But so Kismet, you that shows up in the feed this morning, and now you mentioned that today. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
But
well, there you go.
when we in much less, happy fluffy dad bullshit notes, when we left off on our last episode, we were talking about Firefly.
Yes.
We were talking about the universe of Firefly. And I was explaining who the Alliance were. And kind of by extension of that, I was explaining who Zoe and Mal were. That, of course, the two of them, the captain and the first officer of the Serenity, Firefly class starship Serenity, were veterans of a war between the invading forces of the Alliance and the Independents, who were trying to fight them off, as it's depicted to us by Mal. And Mal, of course, is a hardcore, still partisan for the Independents. There's an episode that starts with him picking a bar fight on Unification Day.
Right.
Which is the commemoration of the end of the Unification War, which he and Zoe fought in on the losing side. The Alliance sought to take control of the independent planets and moons not previously under its control. And the Alliance is the overarching big bad of the series. They experimented on River. They send the hunters after the crew of the Serenity because they have River with them. And the Alliance is decried repeatedly by Mal as being oppressive and a bunch of invading bullies. And Simon Tam, when we hear about his backstory and the process of the kind of the backstory of an episode that he's heavily involved in, we kind of find out that life on a core world looks like something out of a cyberpunk novel. And he particularly comes from the privileged class of the Alliance kind of society. He and River. He gets warned by his parents that, you need to stop pushing on this. This is dangerous. You're going to make people angry, whatever. And that kind of points in a direction of this being kind of this corporate, kind of fascist, kind of weird, kind of, surveillance state, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of the extent to which we get an explanation of who the Alliance are. What we see in the series is that Alliance soldiers wear purple, a very bluish shade of purple. Independents wore brown, which is where the appellation of brown coats comes from, that Mal and Zoe were brown coats, and the fandom are brown coats. In the bits of war backstory that we see in the series, it's clear that the independent military had a military structure, but they were a lot more ad hoc and ragtag than the Alliance Army.
Would you call them a loose confederation, if you will?
In a way, yes.
Can I come back to that brown coats thing?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Shorter version of a coat, maybe less warm, might be a shirt.
Not the vibe I ever picked up.
No, certainly not in the writing of the show or anything, but the similarity to that always really did bother me. Brown coats, brown shirts, that. It was too close for my comfort.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
That was not. Now, of course, I come from a very different ideological background than you do. So that was never something that kind of twigged for me. I never picked up on that in the same way. But I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Well,
but the kind of the point that I want to make is that the independent army is always portrayed as being, as I said, a lot more ad hoc and ragtag.
Mm-hmm.
And they fought a great deal of spirit and determination, and they never gave up. And they were fighting against a foe that had a massive material advantage and fought much more mechanistically.
And had a lot more cities.
They were much more urbanized.
Mm-hmm.
They had a great deal of material advantage. They had a great deal of technological advantage. They had a great deal of manpower advantage.
Right.
The independents were always outnumbered.
Right, and they wore a color very close to a deep blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in Bushwhacked, that's the title of the episode, and we're going to get back to that title in a little bit because it's important. Mal is questioned by an Alliance officer. They all wind up getting picked up by an Alliance cruiser after a raid by the Reavers.
Right.
And they all get picked up.
Wait, I thought River was the one that they were helping to keep safe.
She was, and I don't remember off the top of my head how they managed to pull that off in the process of doing all this. But
so how
is
she doing the raid then?
Nice.
Thank
nice.
you.
Reaver, long E.
Okay, fine. You want to
Reaver,
pronounce it the way they do in the show. Reaver. Okay.
You can't see it, of course, but I'm now flipping Damian the bird. So, anyway, in this episode, Mal gets questioned by an Alliance officer about his bitterness from the war, because the accusation winds up being leveled that, you know, it's not these mythical barbarian reavers that attacked this other ship. It's you attacked this ship because you're still bitter about the war and you're trying to attack these people who are trying to go about their business and whatever, and they're loyalists to the Alliance. And he specifically says, you know, are you, you know, you're doing this because you're angry about the fact that you were on the wrong side of the war.
Right.
Mal's answer is, may have been the losing side. Still not convinced it was the wrong side.
Yeah, and that was number one, great writing, but it also twigged, as you say, for me as well.
Okay, all right, and I'm gonna before we get into more about how it twigged, I'm gonna stop you there because I got more to say.
Okay.
So Mal, so this is kind of I'm gonna draw all that together before we get into real world history. Mal and the crew of the Serenity are basically a criminal gang committing multiple heists against the purple uniformed authorities of the Alliance. The captain and his lieutenant are both veterans of the war who still carry their allegiance to their side years after it has ended.
Yes.
Okay. Nobody can argue any of those points. That's all canon within the series.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about Missouri.
Thank you. Very specifically. Yep.
Missouri was a border state. It had been admitted to the Union in 1821 as a slave state in order to balance out the state of Maine. Important geographical fact for anybody who doesn't have a map in front of them, of course, Missouri is in the Midwest on the Mississippi River. Maine, of course, is in the very extreme Northeast. And so Missouri was accepted as a slave state into the Union. Maine was a free state. And as part of the Missouri Compromise, which we all learned about in 8th grade U.S. history, no slavery was supposed to be legal above latitude 3630.
Right.
But now we need to talk about Kansas because the Kansas-Nebraska Act happened in 1854, and suddenly instead of 3630, the issue became the idea of popular sovereignty.
Right.
Now it should be noted that the first attempt to form a territorial legislature for Kansas was marked by rampant election fraud by pro-slavery border ruffians coming from Missouri.
Well, I'm sure there were good people on both sides, though, Ed. I mean,
fuck you. And your good people on both sides. One side wanted to own people as property. Screw that.
That's a tradition. It just, that they were brand new to that area with.
Yeah, heritage, not hate, right?
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay, whatever. Fuck you.
Yeah.
And them. With a cattle prod.
Yeah.
a federal panel of investigators. This is in I want to say it's 55. A panel of federal regulators or investigators ruled that the election would have led to a free state majority if not for that interference from Missouri, and that pro-slavery delegates ignored all of that and moved the state capital closer to Missouri and started immediately passing pro-slavery laws in the territory. So they held an election. People from Missouri crossed over the Mississippi River into Kansas in order to vote fraudulently in that election in favor of pro-slavery candidates for the legislature. The federal investigators said, this is all a load of bullshit. These people should not be part of the government. There needs to be a new election. A new election was actually held.
Oh, wait. And the federal government, though, its capital is in Washington, D.C., which is in a northern state called Virginia.
Oh, you sweet summer child. To cross-pollinate from another nerddom. But no.
No?
Okay, here's what I want to point out. These are federal regulators, and as you say, Washington, D.C., of course, as anybody who looks at the map knows, is located, is surrounded by Virginia, which is not a northern state.
Oh, no, Robert E. Lee didn't like slavery, and he was from Virginia. I don't...
Sideways with a chainsaw. No. The fact that federal regulators would say, no, this is bullshit, should, if anything, be that much more telling about what bullshit it was based on the time period.
Yeah.
And so the federal panel had explicitly stated these people had no legal authority, but they all just said, no, you know what? We were elected. We're going to do it anyway. And when abolitionists formed a competing legislature in Topeka, U.S. President Franklin Pierce ruled they were insurrectionists and let the pro-slavery legislature carry on without federal intervention.
Well, that sounds like a president is abrogating his duty to actually enforce federal law when state law is being made that runs counter to the freedoms and the agreements under a federal system, though. I mean, surely he didn't get away with that.
No, he totally did.
Oh.
I wish I could argue differently, but he totally did.
Oh.
So this led to the situation that is referred to as Bleeding Kansas. Violence broke out in people with weapons actually started doing shit in 1855. Competing militias mostly wound up maneuvering against each other. There were not really a whole lot of fatalities. There was not actually a lot of bloodshed. There was destruction of property. There were towns being laid siege by one militia or another, either pro-slavery or anti-slavery.
Right.
But in 1856, the conflict escalated with the sack of Lawrence, Kansas. The town of Lawrence was an abolitionist town, and an anti-slavery mob led by the pro-slavery sheriff of Douglas County basically sacked the town. They
sacked as in took over with guns.
Yeah, and then burned parts of it to the ground, looted, destroyed a massive amount of property.
God, what did they do when the federal government? What did they do when the federal government came in and told them to stop and put up a barricade to stop all this from happening?
Yeah, I really wish I could say that actually happened. Because again, Franklin Pierce was president of the United States, and so commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, and therefore that isn't what happened. In 1850,
really incompetent. Just letting bad things happen to good people.
Yes.
Glad
he
we've
is.
learned.
I'm not even.
I mean, could you imagine now?
Oh, yeah, I wish. I wish history had gone differently in so many ways right now. But So in 1856, this is an event. We may have referenced this before on the show, but in 1856, Senator Sumner,
Yeah, we did.
of Massachusetts, was beaten nearly to death with a cane by a representative from the South.
Ooh, let me guess. Let me guess what state. Let me guess. South Carolina.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Who knew?
Big shock.
Yeah, no kidding.
Big surprise.
Now, partly because he was Sumner was being really mean to everyone, and that's not okay.
Yes. Sumner was deeply incivil.
Mm-hmm.
Incivil. Anyway, whatever, whichever prefix I need to attach to it. He was deeply uncivil in a speech where he referred to what was going on in Kansas at the time, and specifically referenced the senator from South Carolina as aiding and abetting the rape of a virgin. He was overtly sexual in his language regarding the violence being done by the slave power against the anti-slavery abolitionist settlers and so forth in Kansas. I didn't go into it in great detail, but the pro-abolition or anti-slavery, pardon me, the anti-slavery folks in Kansas had actually said, okay, no, you know what? Look, we have our own legislature, and that legislature set itself up and was trying to do the business of governing the territory in the manner of actually representing the anti-slavery majority of people in the territory.
See, that's their mistake, though. Like, you can't represent the majority of people and what they want in a government, because if you do, then like you have the tyranny of the mob. And you need to be able to protect the minorities' rights. Jefferson talked about this. So really, if you let them do the anti-slavery thing, that wouldn't have protected the black people living there, because black people are a minority. And therefore, by allowing slavery,
do you want me to point out where the breakdown is in your chain of logic?
Go for it.
Because it's really fucking easy.
But the words sound alike.
The minority
and the grammar works.
We're talking about is not that. Yeah, yes. That's one of the wonderfully magical things about the English language is you can switch a word out like that. and pull, frankly, that kind of bullshit out of your anus without
without nary
having
a
to really
pop.
break a sweat. Yeah, without even so much as a whisper of a fart. But no, that's not how that works. And so anyway, Sumner gave this speech in which he was, frankly, incredibly rude.
Oh, well.
To the senator from South Carolina. And then the representative in the House of Representatives from South Carolina, who was related to the senator from South Carolina.
Son-in-law.
Yeah. Walked into the Senate chamber with a very heavy hardwood cane and beat the shit out of Sumner, almost to the point of death, leaving him with significant neurological damage that actually required that he go to Europe for treatment for a number of years. I don't know if I want to say to their credit, but I kind of want to say to their credit, the people of Massachusetts continued electing Sumner for the next, I don't know how many years, while he was still unable to serve. So his seat sat empty because the people of Massachusetts were like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
He's our guy.
Yep.
So that just gives you an idea of how bad the caning was. But in Southern newspapers and in pro-slavery newspapers, editorials called for abolitionists in Kansas to all be similarly beaten nearly to the point of death.
Right. Because they were rude
abolitionist views
in the North about this peculiar institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly, obviously, they didn't overreact at all. In a state,
no, not in the least.
In a state where the property requirement for being a senator meant that you had to own at least 200 slaves. That was an
important point.
State regulation. Yeah, so you had to own at least 200 slaves to become a senator in South Carolina.
So,
and then they sent the
complete
dude.
tangent.
They sent the dude so many like cane
Canes.
handles. Yeah.
Oh no, I found out in doing my research for this episode that like other Southern senators actually got pieces of the cane he had used
Yes.
to beat Sumner,
Yes.
and they made necklaces out of them to show solidarity.
Well, like a rational person would. Again, if he had just been polite.
How fucking barbaric. I'm sorry. I'm going to be just unapologetically a California fucking Yankee.
Partisan.
No. Okay. Screw that. Yeah, well, yeah. You know what? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Because, of the two of us, I was actually, talking about the two of us to another group of my friends today, and we were talking about whether you would get along with other friends of mine, and I said, well, Damian isn't actually a full-blown Marxist.
True.
And that's kind of as far as I was able to go. And I was like, yeah, no. So as the one of us who counts as the right winger out of the two of us, can I just say, no, fuck that.
Okay. Well, yeah.
With a cattle prod.
All right. So
No.
So you support the Republicans from back then. That's fine.
The Republicans of that era. It's an important caveat. Yes.
Okay. So you agree that the current party that's in power is the party of Lincoln. Got it. All right.
Fuck you. I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. This episode was going to be about one thing. Do we need to make it about another? Because I've been locked up in my house for I don't even know how goddamn long anymore. Do you really want to go?
Okay. So Sumner.
Goddamn.
Sumner got beaten damn near to death to the point where he was bellowing like a cow, and other guys drew their guns to keep back other people from protecting him from the beating he was receiving.
Yeah, because of course, the Democrats of that era were the hardcore MAGAT Republicans of this era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so now. And again, Southern newspapers and pro-slavery newspapers called for all abolitionists to face a similar fate. In May of 1856, John Brown led the massacre at Potawatomi Creek, in which pro-slavery settlers were murdered with broadswords.
John Brown might have been the only woke person in the 1800s. He took a fucking broadsword to try to stop slavery. He was a white dude who thought that black dudes would be his equals, or should be. And he took a broadsword to make his point, which is frankly the only kind of language that the South seems to understand. So good job on him fighting fire with fire. Or fighting fire with weapons.
I'm not going to,
He's a fucking hero. All the joking that I was just doing aside, John Brown is a goddamn hero. He is absolutely 100% the hero of that era, I think.
I have a hard time arguing with you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say that based on modern liberal kind of social mores.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm being very presentist.
He comes off as an extremist, of course, because
because he took a broadsword to people.
The argument, of course, gets made that at Potawatomi Creek, the individuals that were hauled out of their homes and murdered were in that moment unarmed and
right.
And so to an extent, we have to recognize it as being in many ways kind of an act of terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
There is the argument, of course, to be made that, of course, those individuals were owning people as property,
engaging in terrorism.
Were themselves engaging in terrorism, and so I mean, we could get into a back and forth debate about that, but I want to include that just as an example of what was going on in Kansas at the time.
Yes,
back and forth.
Sure.
Not to say good people on both sides. No. But the violence was a tit for tat kind of situation is what I'm trying to say in this case. Now, a congressional commission investigated this. This is after. So one group first looked at it and said, no, this is illegitimate. These people shouldn't have legislative power.
Right.
Pierce went, yeah, no, I don't give a shit. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
A congressional commission investigated the election of the pro-slavery legislature in April of '56. They concluded that the election was bogus, with rampant voting from non-residents. And it's important for me to note here that those non-residents all came from Missouri. Pierce refused to recognize its conclusions, and in July, federal troops ordered the anti-slavery legislature in Topeka to disband. Like, they literally pointed cannons at the building in which the legislature was meeting and lit long fuses.
Wow.
And it should be noted that the officer commanding those federal troops was the cousin of Senator Sumner. Can you imagine being the guy having to do that?
Wow. Did they have the you don't have to follow immoral orders clause yet?
No.
For soldiering?
That is a relic of the Vietnam era.
Okay.
We have that because of Lieutenant Calley.
Right. Okay.
And
wow.
to actually, I mean, I should say we have that as a relic of the Nuremberg trials, but in a very specifically American sense.
Right.
We have that because of Lieutenant Calley.
Wow. Hey, fun fact: did you know that in Missouri, lightning bugs are also called devil bugs, but they're not called fireflies?
Really?
Yeah, fireflies. You don't get fireflies until you get west of Kansas.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's weird. Yeah, just kind of a fun thing.
All right. So anyway, the anti-slavery legislature was forced to disband in Kansas in August of '56 at the Battle of Osawatomie. Several hundred border ruffians from Missouri fought against the inhabitants of Osawatomie, a majority anti-slavery settlement. They showed up and raided the place, basically. In 1858, border ruffians kidnapped and shot 11 unarmed abolitionist settlers, killing 5 in the Marais de Cygnus massacre. And it's important. I want to point out that I'm using the phrase border ruffians in both of these cases for an important reason, which is to say border ruffians were all Missourians.
So people coming across and committing raids and essentially acts of terrorism, if you will.
Yeah. So now note the balance of violence. We have one incident that we see carried out by anti-slavery John Brown. We have multiple incidents carried out by pro-slavery forces. Note the fact that these are all terrorist paramilitary attacks.
Right.
Note all of that, and then keep it in mind as I now go back to Missouri.
Wait, just real quick. You talked about a group of paramilitary folk who sacked the town, correct? A little while back.
Yes.
Showed up
correct.
Armed at the Capitol, essentially, took it over.
Yeah.
In support of their ideology.
Nothing like it has happened in modern politics.
Well, I'm just glad that we've learned our lesson. Yeah.
Except like earlier this week was it Kentucky?
Well, they didn't
was
go.
It Tennessee?
They didn't go into the Capitol in Kentucky except in January of this last year. They did that as a different part of a different rally, but there were people who stormed several capitals in the recent time because we have a shelter in place basically across all the states. And people have gone armed and started congregating and threatening to shoot our governor, threatening to lock him up, a constitutionally elected state official. So, yeah, it's... yeah.
Okay, so I'm wrong. This has actually happened again. Okay, well, that's depressing and kind of angry making.
But this time you have a president who is
exactly like Pierce.
No, because Pierce had military experience.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Good point.
and had competence in several realms. So, no. Pierce's balls hit his saddle so hard that he fainted. He was in the military.
I had forgotten about that story.
Yeah. He's got his magic testicles. Yeah, crushed his nuts.
Yeah.
I had some guy that came after me pretty hard about that about 4 years ago. Like trying to prove to me that like no, he didn't crush his nuts and blah blah blah. Like he was like picking apart the details of the story instead of recognizing the overarching mythos that was being used.
Theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, sweetie. So yeah.
Pierce was an asshole. We're done.
Yeah.
So so now I'm getting back to Missouri.
Sure.
In 1860, a pro-South governor was elected to office who publicly supported the idea, which was a carryover from the pro-Northern governor who had preceded him. The idea was the state was going to remain in the Union, but stay militarily neutral, meaning they were not going to send forces to the Union. They were not going to send men to the South.
Okay.
It was we're going to remain in the Union, but we're not going to support the Union. We're going to be militarily neutral.
Okay.
Now, behind the scenes, the same asshole worked to funnel money to secessionist efforts to arm the Missouri Home Guard, which was a majority slave-holding, pro-slavery kind of group.
Now, when you say money, do you mean like taxpayer money?
No, trying to get bank funding.
Okay, cool. So at least it's a private enterprise trying to hold up. Oh boy.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Whatever the fuck that means. But and then also behind closed doors, he was actively campaigning for secession.
Wow.
In 1861, federal troops showed up in the state and tried to took control of the arsenal at Camp Jackson, which was a federal arsenal. And there's an awful lot of back and forth about this, but that led ultimately to the pro-slavery faction within the state legislature having to flee the capital. And in exile, they all voted to secede. I'm painting with a very broad brush. I'm simplifying a great deal here. But this wound up leading to a situation where Missouri had a star on both flags in the Civil War. And Missouri ultimately, which remember originally they'd said we're not going to send troops either direction.
Right.
Turns out they wound up sending troops both directions.
Like letting people choose?
Well, it was kind of a regional thing. Most of the Unionists in the state came from the region around St. Louis itself, which was kind of a bastion of Union support. And then the western and southern and generally more rural parts of the state were where most of the Confederate sympathizers were.
Again, urban versus rural. Okay.
Yeah. So the war went how the war went. A numerically and technologically superior force ultimately won victory over a less well-organized, poorly equipped, outnumbered rebel army. Despite all of their elan, despite however much honor they brought to the fight, they lost. All caps. I want to say again, they lost. And after the war, a very great many of the veterans of the Confederacy, along with a very great many of its civilians, were immensely bitter about it. But before we go too far with that, one detail about the war is really important. Bushwhackers. Note that bushwhack or bushwhacked is a title of an episode of our TV series. Both pro-Union and pro-Confederate irregular military forces. So we're talking about paramilitaries. In modern parlance, we'd call them paramilitaries. Operated in Kansas, Arkansas, and Missouri during the war. Union irregulars were referred to as Jayhawkers. Confederate irregulars were referred to as bushwhackers.
Kentucky has a university, and their mascot is the Jayhawk, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Kentucky was Union border state as well, but kept slaves.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Worth noting. So in Missouri, the two big names during the Civil War, as far as paramilitaries on the southern side, were James Quantrill, the leader of Quantrill's Raiders, and Bloody Bill Anderson. Now, Anderson started his, for lack of a better word, his career as a lieutenant under Quantrill. And Anderson is the one who eventually had the James brothers, Frank and Jesse, join his forces.
Right.
Now, something that struck me while I was doing this research is, you hear about these guys who are these leaders of these paramilitary organizations. You hear about these guys who hold the kind of honorary, kind of semi-official rank of being colonel. Quantrill kind of carried around the rank of colonel. And what's interesting to note is at the time that they started their paramilitary terrorist careers, both of them were in their 20s.
It's a bit young.
They like I was when I looked at Bloody Bill Anderson for doing the research for this episode, I was taken aback by the fact that he was 24 years old when he became the leader of this band of
Ruffians.
Outlaws, essentially ruffians. Yeah. And Quantrill was only 4 or 5 years old. He was under 30. Now, it should also be noted that when Jesse James joined Quantrill's organization under Anderson in 1964, he was only 16. So there's a certain era attitude toward age that's involved in that. But you don't think you hear a name like Colonel Quantrill, and personally I picture a guy my own age or a little bit older.
I'm thinking white hair when I hear Colonel, not because of Colonel Sanders either, just because you hear Colonel, you
have to have worked your way up through some kind of an organization, and in order to do that, you've got to be a certain age. You have to have a career behind you. Nope.
You can also get a field commission or a family commission, or you could be a self-named colonel. Anybody back then could have called themselves a colonel one town over from where they grew up, and nobody would have known.
Nobody would have known.
There's a lot of ways to go about it. And interestingly, the people who illegitimately take over countries will often not award themselves the rank of general, but the rank of colonel. Gaddafi did that.
Yeah. So what's interesting is Quantrill actually answered to a Confederate chain of command. He had a Confederate, a as legitimate as any Confederate general ever was.
Right.
But he had a no kidding, recognized by the Confederate government as a general in the Confederate Army, kind of sort of giving him go cause trouble out here kind of orders. Anderson never really did. Anderson never held any kind of even semi-official military rank. And all of these guys were irregulars. They were all paramilitaries. And so when they got captured, when any of their number got captured, they were treated as common criminals. And
which
they
were.
Which they were. And so they were given a summary kind of trial or court martial, and they were hanged
as traitors,
as criminals and traitors. Yeah.
Right.
And so I've got other stuff to go from there, but I think now would be a good time for us to kind of take a moment, take a breath before we get too overheated, and maybe talk about our sponsor.
Yeah, well, it's actually not a sponsor tonight, but it is a commercial that we're very pleased to put on. So Empire Comics Vault in Sacramento located actually on Fulton Avenue at 1120 Fulton Avenue, Sacramento, California, 95825. Is run by a wonderful man named Ben Schwartz. He has 2 pugs that walk around that store while you can shop for comic books. And currently that comic store is closed because it is not considered an essential, quite rightly. So they are closed to the public, which is a shame because community-wise, it's a really wonderful place to get to go. But Ben is still mailing out comics to people. He still has gift certificates that you can buy. He can still actually recommend a good deal of comic books because, quite frankly, he's read a lot of them, so he knows what he's talking about. He's also currently restocking back issues, so if you have gaps in your comic collection, you might want to call him to try to fill that gap. And if you've got kids that you're trying to figure out reading for, kids' books are always 20% off, so there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
I also want to kind of ask here, since you say that he's restocking on back issues, you talk about if you have a hole in your collection. What about if you're in a situation where you have some stuff that you want to try to offload? Because if he's selling them, then he's got to be getting them somewhere to do that. Is that something people can do at this point? Could you contact him and say, hey, this is what I got,
I would recommend calling him. Yeah. If you call him at 916-482-8779 during normal business hours, so essentially from about 11 a.m. forward, you might be able to ask him that very question. And if not that question, then plenty of others about comics that you might love. When all of this blows over, please go visit him at 1120 Fulton Avenue, Sacramento, California, 95825. Because he really is a wonderful man who runs a really nice business. They do podcasts out of there. They do comedy shows there in the summer. He's always been very good to the community. So I encourage all of us to give back a little. Once again, you can call him at 916-482-8779.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. And now back to our show.
So the Union authorities treated bushwhackers as criminals because in the eyes of the law, that's what they were.
Sure.
And so in 1863, Quantrill's group, at this point with Anderson acting as one of his lieutenants, attacked the town of Lawrence, Kansas, set fire to a significant portion of the town, and murdered 164 civilians. Now, Quantrill himself said that his motivation for the attack was, quote, to plunder and destroy the town in retaliation for Osceola, which was a reference to the Union's attack on Osceola, Missouri in September 1861, led by Senator James Lane. Osceola was plundered and 9 men were given a drumhead court-martial and executed. Lawrence was purported to be the home base of Union Jayhawker forces, who had, it has to be admitted, committed atrocities in the western plantation counties of Missouri. And they were referred to as redlegs in many cases, or Jayhawkers. In western Missouri, they had committed raids into that part of the state where there were plantations, where there was slavery going on, and they had committed torture of unarmed civilians. None of the Jayhawkers themselves were killed in the raid on Lawrence, so far as anybody can tell. The people who were the victims of the Lawrence massacre were not paramilitaries, and there were 164 people killed in this raid.
Wow. That,
again, Quantrill argued was revenge for the attack on Osceola, Missouri.
Pretty sure revenge attacks aren't really something that's, what's the word I'm looking for, sanctioned in the Code of War when you talk about fighting honorably.
Well, yeah, and I to play devil's advocate and,
and you will be.
And in this case, this is, of course, before the Geneva Convention was even the twinkle in the eye of a diplomat anywhere. But yes, no, you're right. Revenge attacks are not considered a legitimate motivation. But that was Quantrill's rationale at the time. In 1864, Jesse James joins his brother Frank as part of Anderson's group.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by this time, Anderson had split from Quantrill. And the reason he'd split from Quantrill's group was because Quantrill had told him he wasn't allowed to get married. And he wanted to get married because it was 1864, and by God, he needed to get laid.
Well, I'm just glad that ideology has really been driving all of these forces.
Yeah, hate it, right? Yeah.
There's no moral high ground whatsoever with these people. None.
No,
None.
none at all.
Like, even to the point where they start splitting off, it's not because, like, well, you're not loyal enough to the cause. It's I want pussy.
Yeah. Well, no. Okay. Here's what you need to remember. To one extent or another, they're all descended from my people, my ancestral people, that is to say, which is to say the Scots, who essentially are like, well, I didn't like that, so I'm going forming my own group, and fuck you.
Yeah.
And it's part of that, Celtic Calvinist, if your church doesn't believe what I think is right, then I'm going to form my own fucking church because I know better than you do. It's the same thing.
Oh yeah.
And so Jesse James and his brother were very likely involved in the Centralia massacre in September of 1864, in which 24 unarmed Union soldiers were executed by the bushwhackers of Bloody Bill Anderson's forces. So here's the deal. So Anderson got all of these Union soldiers off of a train in Centralia. He lined them all up. And then he complained loudly about how the Union had been treating irregular forces, which is to say bushwhackers. That they would treat them like common criminals. And then he murdered all but one of them. Had them all summarily executed.
I like the moxie that it takes to put yourself on the same level as an actual army, though. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have a problem with you as equals. And it's like, bitch, you're not equals. Like, you're a terrorist.
No, you're a bandit. You're banditti and a terrorist, and you want to try to claim that? Yeah, no, totally. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So then they wound up losing the war, and bushwhackers turned into outlaws. Missouri, which is where all of these assholes had come from to cause all this trouble in Kansas, remained at war with itself. Because again,
of course it did.
It should, it should be. It's important to keep in mind that demographically speaking, okay, so Missouri became a state in 1821 as part of the Missouri Compromise, and in 1821 it was majority slaveholding. Well, between 1821 and 1860, the demographics of the state changed considerably. They had a huge influx of German immigrants, first of all, Irish immigrants after that, and then other European immigrants from other parts of the continent after that. And the majority of those new folks coming into the state were not pro-slavery.
Right.
So the state had this really significant demographic divide between all of the plantation people out in the rural parts of the state, especially farther toward the south and especially out west, and then in and around St. Louis, which was mostly abolitionist, mostly free labor. And so former bushwhackers started committing violent crimes and acts of terrorism against what was then the Republican Party, the Reconstructionist government.
Right.
And essentially, they continued the war by criminal means.
So this is after Lincoln is dead. This is after Appomattox. This is after all that. Yeah, they're keeping it going.
Yeah, they're refusing to let the war end.
Right.
And Jesse James, in particular, became famous for the exploits of the gang he and his brother Frank led. And this includes multiple bank, train, and stagecoach robberies across the Midwest, notably moving up into Minnesota, which was a very much Union state.
Yes.
And while he and his gang, this is now in the 1860s into 1870s, he wrote repeatedly to newspapers taking responsibility for the gang's crimes and complaining bitterly about the wrongs done to pro-slavery Missourians before, during, and after the war. He specifically painted himself and his family as victims,
Of course,
of abolitionist and Republican and Reconstructionist officials, and justified his actions as revenge for the crimes done by the Union Army.
So, and yet again, this is not a guy driven by ideology, but this is somebody who saw in his lifetime an influx of folks with a different ideology, because you said there was a demographic shift from statehood till so people coming from cities and invading and bringing their ideology in. If you're living there and you don't believe that change ever should exist, then you would say that. So any fighting that you do thereafter, they have it coming.
Yep.
Okay.
So now about that lost cause historiography we've talked about before.
Yes.
So the South, quote unquote, fought with honor. The South was,
I must have missed that in your examples.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, these are not the best examples if you want to try to forward that argument. But, we've talked about lost cause historiography before, and we've talked about why it is that it makes me want to, pantomime kicking somebody's corpse under the table. Because it's a load of bullshit.
Right.
And this is where kind of we come back to Firefly, because the thing is, during his lifetime, Jesse James specifically, and I talk about Jesse James for a reason specifically. During his lifetime, Jesse James had sympathetic coverage in the press, and he gained a great deal of sympathy from the public, largely because there were an awful lot of people in the wake of the Civil War who were former Confederates who were pissed off about the fact that they'd lost. And they agreed with him about the fact that he and his family were all victims. And so he wound up turning into this figure that he wound up getting romanticized and turned into this kind of Robin Hood figure. And then in later eras, Hollywood picked up on that, and there have been close to a dozen movies made about his life in which he is this sympathetic Robin Hood kind of figure. Never mind the fact that he was a fucking terrorist.
I remember there was a Brady Bunch episode where Peter really liked Jesse James, and they had a talk about it, and he ended up meeting a guy whose dad was killed by Jesse James. And there was this whole thing about how...
I remember that now, too.
Yeah, where he would have people turn their back to him so that he didn't have to look at them when he shot them. And, of course, in 30 minutes, it fixed it all. But I just remember that was... I mean, that's the Brady Bunch. So that's what, the 70s?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the few times I think that anybody in mainstream American popular culture has characterized Jesse James in a negative light. He has gotten this kind of, again, romantic outlaw kind of treatment, and in one era it was overtly because the people who were paying for movies to be made were Confederate sympathizers. And then in later eras, it was because, he's an anti-establishment figure. And so if you look at anything from the 60s or very early 70s about him, then that's probably why he's going to get lionized. And then and nobody looks at the fact that, no, seriously, he was a marauding criminal, and
Right.
the very first, I mean, the beginnings of his career involved the summary execution of a group of unarmed Union soldiers who got hauled off of a train in Centralia, Kansas.
So,
Like,
and nobody's listening about that either, like from
Yeah.
age to age. So it's kind of like in one era, out the other.
Timestamp.
Way too
Please.
late in the game, but I've hit you with
Way
other
too late.
other
You're
shit
slipping.
when I
Yeah, I know.
was
There's been
acting
other
like
stuff, but
like
that's-
I didn't know the South's history.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, as far as literally a pun, that's like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
fine. But yeah, so now, what I want to point out, unfortunately, is now this is where we're going to come back to Firefly.
Okay.
Because in interviews, Joss Whedon has pointed out that people trying to survive in a post kind of Civil War kind of environment is kind of what he wanted to look at when he was writing the ideas behind what became Firefly.
And most westerns are that slice of life that's post Civil War too.
Yeah, and certainly what I'm going to say in a second could be pointed at the Western genre in general. But I think because of who all makes up science fiction fandom, I think we need to recognize as a group that the stories told by Firefly forward and are unfortunately really heavily, and I think I honestly do think subconsciously, are influenced by the Lost Cause narrative. You know, it's this identifying with the underdog, identifying with the rebels against the alliance, quote unquote.
Again,
alliance,
it's a
which
simplified.
is really the Union.
Yeah. It's a simplified underdog, though. I hate the term underdog when you're dealing with the South because they weren't the underdog. They were rank villains. They were trying to own people. That's not an underdog thing to do. Like, it's such a simplified underdog.
Yeah, well, yeah, and historically, you're totally correct. And I think the overwhelming majority of Firefly fans would agree. I think based on what I know about the fandom for the show, I think most people who are really dedicated fans of the show would if you explicitly talk about the Confederacy, I think they'd agree. But I think we need all of us to look at what this story says, and we need to recognize that there is not enough done in the storyline to make it clear that the Alliance is not the Union and the Independents are not the Confederacy, because at a passing glance, there's way too many parallels.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to try to argue that the Alliance is like the Empire, there's not enough evidence given to us of that. I mean, yes, they did some terrible things, but we don't know what it was that the Independents were fighting for. We don't know what it was that was going on those planets that the Independents were trying to stay independent. We don't know. Hell, we don't know anything about Mal's background before the war. We don't know anything about Zoe's background before the war. We don't know what it was exactly that sparked the conflict. The only word that we have about it is from Mal and Zoe, who I hate to be the one talking like, the villain from the series, but like they are both very clearly marked by the PTSD they're still carrying from the Battle of Serenity Valley. And we don't know the extent to which the Alliance is like neo-fascist.
Right.
We don't know the extent to which they are corporatist, rightist, whatever you want to say. Yeah, I mean, we know that some element of some functionary element of the Alliance was responsible for what happened to River, which is horrible and awful, and clearly those people are terrible. But we don't know what started the war. We only have Mal and Zoe's word for it in the series and then in the film, and I mean, the movie points out that like the Reavers are somehow the fault of the Alliance because they were trying to do some kind of mass, mind control kind of experiment. So, okay, if we take that into account, then okay, they're pretty clearly pretty nasty. But within the context of the series itself, we don't know. And a friend of mine heard my remarks about this on Facebook long before I even started writing down my thesis for this episode. And he said, well, it's pretty clear that Mal and Zoe are unreliable narrators because, Mal is clearly a petty criminal who's, and of course he'd argue with being called a petty criminal. He makes a point of that. Well, I wouldn't say petty. I'd say shushi. Shushi means petty,
Right.
And again, scintillating dialogue. It's one of the wonderful things about the series. But, there's an unreliable narrator only counts as an unreliable narrator if you pick apart how unreliable they are.
Yeah, if you have their narration pulled apart, cool. But if you don't, if it is what guides you through the whole series, they're not an unreliable narrator unless you've shown that they are in some way deficient as a narrator. That their experience is not verifiable or that their experience is not valid in some way.
And I don't think Whedon, in the course of the 14 episodes of the series,
he doesn't do that at all.
He doesn't do that.
He goes the other way. I mean, Mal is smart. He is smart and he is affable. And while he might have some failings as a person, by and large, he has the heart of gold.
Yeah. And the reason this is a problem is we're now operating anybody who comes into this fandom now in the times in which we are living right now is going to see this narrative where we have this plucky group of outlaws who are operating, against the oppressive overarching government of the Alliance. And it is entirely a lost cause narrative.
Oh,
it is. And again, I go back to that quote.
Yes.
That you said last episode cost you so much trouble in the moment. It may have been the losing side. I'm still not convinced it was the wrong one.
Right.
Like, that's the kind of argument that leads in the direction of heritage, not hate, that leads in the direction of, good people on both sides. And it's like, no, man. Historically speaking, the archetypes from which all of this was taken is based on the idea that one side in this conflict wanted to fucking own people.
Right. And that's somehow the moral equivalent to wanting to stop it. Or that's somehow the moral equivalent to wanting to stop them from leaving so they could go do it. Like, grammatically, those are the same. Morally, they are not.
Yeah. And for all of the other stuff that Joss Whedon did in the process of casting the series, in the process of defining who the characters were, and all of the other stuff that he did, he did some wonderful, wonderful things. And I don't want to take anything away from all the good stuff he did, but I think it's important that we all take a moment to recognize that if this is not examined, it's troubling. And I mean, part of that is me being a Catholic and, Council of Nicaea having determined that, the Gospel of Thomas was not acceptable because, okay, look, we're not going to put this in the Bible, not because it's actually heretical, but because some of the stuff is like, if you don't know everything else, some of the stuff can be really dangerous. It's kind of the same thing.
I would say that it certainly, if you have enough material out there that is sympathetic to the side that was morally bankrupt, then you're going to prime everyone to be sympathetic to the wrong side. And the proof that I would have for that is the first 60 years of cinema. Or, frankly, the first, from the 1880s forward through the 1960s, basically until black people started getting college degrees in any large numbers from the GI Bill. So once you had that, you stopped having lost cause ideology be the only flavor that was in the ice cream shop. And even that, it still sets a tone for plenty of other white historians who are like, nah, I don't want to do that kind of history. I want to do this. And they just accept that as being true because it's been true this whole time. And same thing with cinema. Yeah. So I'd say if you prime it like that, which again, we talked about this with the wrestling episodes. If you prime it like that, you are being grossly irresponsible to history and to the culture. So yeah, I would agree with you that we not only have to look at what Joss Whedon did and where he was coming from on it, but also where it fails to recognize the actual history of what actually happened.
Yeah, and again, I want to state this just so we don't wind up being completely driven off of Twitter with torches and pitchforks. I want to point out really clearly that I think the series is excellent TV. Mm-hmm. I just think that when Whedon was writing it, he was unconsciously, because the thing is, we all have been brought up in an environment where even in a state as liberal mm-hmm. as California, we're still educated in what is way too much mm-hmm. a lost cause kind of curriculum mm-hmm. in terms of American history. We're not as much as places like Florida or God forbid the Carolinas or Texas. But I mean, still the emphasis in the textbooks when I was in middle school and high school, the emphasis was on the conflict about states' rights.
Right. Same with me.
And as we exhaustively talked about in your magnum opus about wrestling and the lost cause, if you look at the primary source documentation, no, motherfucker, it was about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the issue was whether or not states could do it, but the thing that motivated them was the issue of whether or not they could own people.
Yeah. Yeah, let's look at what the states were trying to do, not just that the states were trying to do something.
Yeah.
Again, because there's two opposite sides doesn't mean that they're equal morally.
Yeah, and meeting in the middle does not necessarily mean that's morally neutral.
Right.
No. And so I think
or that moral neutrality is a proper position to take as an historian.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Go
No, not at all. I think it's an important point you made, but and just the extent to which we've all been kind of marinating mm-hmm. in that from our youth.
Mm-hmm.
We wound up to digress for a moment. We wound up at my site in my district this year mm-hmm. as social studies instructors. We're getting new textbooks next year.
Oh, what's that?
And I was part of. It's awesome.
Oh, wow.
The process of choosing one is arduous and a pain in the ass, but getting new textbooks is wonderful. So I was part of the pilot program on my campus for the new textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm doing world history 100%. I'm not dealing with 8th graders,
mm-hmm.
but the really great, wonderful news that I got from the folks who were doing piloting for the 8th grade text was that the new 8th grade text doesn't hit on states' rights so much, and it spends a lot more time talking about slavery.
Good.
And that really made me happy. I'm like, okay, good. So we're not buying the same fucking textbook that Texas is. This is a good sign.
Right.
To be a little bit regionalist there for a moment, but and the thing is, like, I grew up with my father having been educated in Florida in the 1940s and 1950s, when segregation was still a thing. And when I was learning about the Civil War in junior high and then in high school, one of the things that he was asking me about was like, so, it's about states' rights, right? I'm like, well, yeah, but it's also about slavery. He was like, well, no, you got to, it's states' rights, because that was how he was educated. Now, my father is, a boomer,
right?
From originally from Florida. And so, his outlook on it is, of course, very much colored by that. But I would argue that, for somebody of his generation and of his upbringing, he is as non-racist. I'm not going to say anti-racist, but he's as non-racist as anybody could be based on his background.
Sure.
But even for him, the narrative of the Civil War was about states' rights, and that's the same kind of reason because of his education. That's what that war was about. And I think for the same reason, we wind up seeing Firefly being this series about this plucky band of people trying to survive, going up against this evil centralized government.
Oh yeah.
Without giving any recognition to, okay, look, all of the trappings that you're using for this,
right,
are taken straight out of real world history. And we need to have something to give us some separation from that. Like if you want to make this about the rebellion against the empire, then let's find something to make this more about the Maquis versus the Nazis.
Yeah. It's not like you don't have a built-in bad guy already.
Yeah, like, if you want the Alliance to be that kind of bad guy, then let's lean harder on the National Socialist Party or the Italian fascists or Franco, for God's sake. Like, I mean, and then it's like, no, in this universe, these are the people that won, and our plucky, independent heroes are the ones trying to live in the universe after those people won. Like, okay, awesome, let's do that. But, for all of the wonderful things that the series does, by leaning so heavily on these tropes that have all been so heavily influenced by the Lost Cause narrative, you wind up reinforcing the Lost Cause narrative, which is the last fucking thing we need to have happen right now.
Especially in our sci-fi, which this is Western in space. But yeah, anything where you're telling us what the world is going to be like on some level, and you come back to the idea of like, oh yeah, it's just like it was in the 1880s in Missouri. You're like, why? Like, why is that
do we want
compelling?
to get back there?
Yeah.
Like, why there?
Yeah.
I get, I get that he wanted to talk about, what do you do in this world where, the authoritarian power kind of wins. I mean, I understand that, but like, find another metaphor, man.
Yeah.
Like, even with all of the Western trappings, you can still do a Western in space and not immediately lean on the obvious post-Civil War U.S. kind of situation. I mean, so that is my problem with this particular series. And of course, then there are other things that we have now found out in the years since Firefly about, Joss Whedon's personal life and his choices and his behavior that are somewhat damaging to his kind of self-promoted idea that he is the woke bae.
Yes.
That's a quote from an interview with him, by the way. I'm woke bae.
Wow.
The moment any middle-aged white guy starts using a phrase like "I'm woke bae," you really need to look really hard at who that dude is.
Yeah. Well, and
I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, he's like 55, something like that. So, number one, don't use those words unironically. Number two, it's that, I'm not racist, but I mean, it's that all the time.
It gets really, really close to that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd go that far as saying it is in fact I'm not racist, but it's way too close for comfort.
Well, he's literally
least.
virtue signaling, and people, when they actually virtue signal, it's often to hide their vice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not gonna argue with that. Yeah. And the remarks that he has now, admittedly, this is all coming out of, anybody who's a fan of his, of course, is familiar with the story. And if you're not a fan of his, you're probably familiar with, all of the stuff that we're talking about right now is coming out of, his divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's two sides to especially those kind of stories. But with that being said, there's a volume of stuff involved that is not a good look for him.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Well, and we didn't get to his fetishization of Asian cultures at all. Like this is at least a multi-part series of what's wrong with Joss Whedon. So I just wanted to put that out there as like, we recognize what we didn't get to tonight as far as he goes, because we were just plumbing into this part of him and where the tendrils come out.
Yeah, and largely because this is one of the points that as somebody who is a history educator, this is something that really, really, like, the other stuff is like, okay, yeah, no, this guy wants to publicize himself as being, woke bae. Like, where does that phrase even come out of your fucking mouth? But he has this kind of self-promoted image as being this kind of guy. But for me, the one that, like, I most personally feel like, no, seriously, I gotta call this out is this particular issue, because, like, when we were talking about professional wrestling, we talked about the fact that, like, this is an insult to historians.
Yes.
Like the primary documentation all points in one direction, and the narrative that's been constructed has been consciously built to obfuscate that and to move in a different direction to try to make people look better than they deserve. And, like, I understand maybe you aren't educated is the only word that comes to mind, but maybe you aren't schooled enough in historiography to understand this. But, like, for God's sake, we as a community need to have a conversation about this, because this is deservedly a beloved series, because these are wonderful, compelling characters, and this is a great story.
Yes.
But when we're watching it, we need to keep in mind that, like, okay, no, look, there are historical parallels here we need to be aware of.
Like, are you sure you want to write along those lines?
Yeah, like, if you're a writer, is this really the kind of story you want to tell? Is there another way you can tell? Is there another way the same narrative can be served by using a different villain? Is there a way this narrative can be served by characterizing the heroes in a slightly different way? And overuse of these tropes reinforces unfortunate ideas. Kind of where I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
And that's basically I've shot my wad. I mean, at that point, that's pretty much what I kind of want to try to say is just, I'm not saying nobody can watch Firefly anymore. I'm not trying to say that we all need to hate on Firefly.
Sure.
I'm not even saying that we all need to hate on Joss Whedon, though I will maybe argue that he doesn't necessarily deserve the amount of credit he got for a long time for being, progressive. But what I am saying is, when we watch this series and when we fall in love with this story, we need to be aware of what it is that we're looking at, and we need to remember the truth behind the tropes that we're looking at.
I would agree.
So there you go.
Thank you.
Based on that, what's your takeaway here? What do you think?
I need to rewatch Firefly with a new lens. Number one, I've forgotten a lot of what happened. Like when you were mentioning, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a thing. I love Star Wars, as anybody who knows me will know. It is highly problematic. Highly problematic. I tell you, watch Star Wars with a 4-year-old girl, and you will see how problematic that shit is. I still love Star Wars, but I have to acknowledge its problems. I think this is going to be another one of those where it is okay to love a work of fiction, but you have to acknowledge from whence it came. Just like we did with comic books. Like, when I taught comic books, or when we talked about the X-Men and we talked about, the 1970s, and it was, these guys were trying to make an allegory, and they were also two white guys living in New York making an allegory about racism. Like, it's okay because you can contextualize it, but you gotta call it out. And I think the same thing's true with Firefly.
Yeah, and when you talked about Fantastic Four, like from a modern lens, there's so much stuff that's like, I'm sorry, we need to pause for a moment and talk about that. Yeah. But you can still love that. But in the process of loving it, you also have to be intellectually honest.
Yeah. What are you loving it for? What are you loving it despite? Yeah.
Yeah. And recognize that, and when you're talking about it with other people, kind of take ownership of that.
Yeah. Call it out for them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that'll do it for me. I'm going to start trying to watch Firefly. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Then my work here is rapidly approaching a medal.
Cool. Well, where can people aim their hate for you in their defense of Joss Whedon against this podcast?
Oh, dear. This is the first time I've actually been afraid to say this. You can find me on the Twitter at EHBlaylock. And you can find me on the Instagram at MRBlaylock. And where can they find you, either to direct their hate or their contempt for you not hating it quite as much as I do?
Sure. Well, there's a few places. One, on Fridays at 8:30, they can find me on twitch.tv/capital puns, as I and my partner Daniel Humbarger sling the best puns this side of the verse. They can also find me on Sundays at twitch.
Well done.
Thank you. They can find me on Sundays at twitch.tv/calling it in the ring, as I and my partner Johnny Taylor are calling some of the best matches seen this side of the verse in pro wrestling. You can also find me at Duh Harmony, has 2 H's in there, on the Twitter and on the Insta. So feel free to drop by and tell us what you think. You can find both of us where?
At Geek History Time on the Twitter machine.
Yes.
I would say that if you really, really desperately feel the need to sling anything at us, that's probably the best place to do it, because one or both of us will respond somehow. Probably most likely there. If you come after us individually, I might just crawl away and hide. So if you really want to have a debate, go to Geek History Time. If you want to just fling something and have me be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Then find me individually. But yeah, I'd say at Geek History Time is the best place.
Definitely.
To do that.
I would also say, if you have anything that you want us to advertise, if you have a business that you think needs special recognition, and if you want to sell things through us, through sponsorship, that is also the place to contact us at Geek History Time on the Twitter. So for all your love and hate and monetary needs, at Geek History Time, and for a Geek History of Time, I'm Damian Harmony.
And I'm Ed Blaylock. And until next time, keep rolling 20s.
Stay shiny.